Hi, I'm Gary Zacharias, and you're listening to the Apologist Bookshelf. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to these various reports about books that I've been reading. What do you think of when you hear the words artificial intelligence? Now, you may say, oh, it's going to be a wonderful future, kind of a utopian view. You may say, I don't really care. You may say, I'm scared to death of it. I don't know where you put yourself on that scale, but about a year ago, I got interested in AI, and I've been reading a lot of books on the topic. I've done a couple of talks to different groups about AI, and I realize it is so deep and there's so much to discuss. I feel like I'm just literally just skimming across the surface of it. And to me, it's fascinating, but I especially wanted to approach it from a Christian perspective. So I came across this book, What Christians Should Know About AI. It's written by Stefan Youngmichael and Sean Penn. And let me tell you just something about them briefly before we get into the book. They're AI experts, but they're focused on biblically grounded AI, committed to that. So Youngmichael is an AI researcher. He has his master's. He's a co-founder of the AI lab at Biola University, the Christian University in Southern California. And he conducts research, he advises businesses, churches, and institutions on AI and how it's going to impact our society. Now, the other person, Sean Penn, he's a Christian and a father. He has 15 years in machine learning and autonomy, at Fujitsu, Toyota, and Broadcom. So this book is their attempt to educate us on AI's spiritual and societal impact. And they're trying to promote a biblical stewardship that will be good for our society, good for the human race, and good for the church. So they on the back cover it says AI is here. Are you ready to respond? It says as AI's power grows, so do the ethical and spiritual challenges. Will AI serve humanity, or will it erode our God-given dignity and values? Well, let me pick up, because they're talking about values. I want to pick up on chapter 3 that is asking the question, what are AI's effects on Christian values? So just so you know kind of where we are in the grand scheme of things, the first chapter is what is AI and what is it capable of doing? Number 2, what does the future look like? And then I thought number 3 would be really important. What are AI's effects on Christian values? So they said they see major effects of AI on 3 Christian values that this chapter is going to cover. Number 1, transparency, which is interesting because I usually don't think of that as a Christian value, but we'll get into that. Number 2, human flourishing. Okay, that one, yeah, I get. And number 3, free will. Okay, so let's start. Number 1. And they even admit that you don't think of transparency as a Christian value. I mean, you think of love and mercy and righteousness. But they said, take a look at James 5. It says we're supposed to confess our sins to one another and pray for one another. So we're supposed to lift up people who are transparent about their sins. God knows everything about us. Take a look at Hebrews 4:13. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. But they said, we really need to, as AI becomes more and more powerful, we need to protect us from being transparent to AI. He said right now, AI companies are dealing with untransparent methods because they don't want to share everything that's going on. And said, frankly, they don't even know what's going on. So it's a problem there that I've spoken on to different groups I've talked to about this issue. They call it the black box issue. AI systems are referred to as black boxes because in practice, all those deep neural networks that are going on there that nobody really knows what's happening on the inside. So AI decision-making processes are unclear, even to the creators, which I think is fascinating. But it's not fascinating in a good way. It's puzzling, and it's a little disturbing to know that the people who create these things kind of shrug and say, we don't know how it came up with some of these points. So think about this. This is me talking rather than these authors of the book here. But think about this. What if you have a bank and it has an AI system there that processes requests for loans, and it just spits out at the end, let's refuse this loan. But they don't know what was there about the loan that made the AI turn it down. So those are the kinds of problems that they have. So they said, we don't really know how AI systems function. We don't know how they do what they do or why they put out what they put out. Now, we understand the data, they said, and we understand the output, but all the layers in between are completely unknown. Well, that's kind of frustrating. So they get into specifics here. 3 main ways AI abuses or endangers the value of transparency. So number one, and we'll go over these more slowly, but let me just introduce these 3 to you. Number one, AI companies are not stating exactly where they get the data that they're using and what data they are using. Number two, training on unknown data might empower biased views to dominate. And number 3, we don't understand the inner workings of AI systems. They're black boxes. So we just understand their capabilities after we've tested explicitly for them. So let's go through these 3. Number 1, AI companies are not really stating exactly where they get the data from and what data they're using. So it says things like OpenAI. So they don't set great standards for data transparency. They don't disclose the data sets they use to train their models. Why? Well, that would give some things away to their competitors. Now, so you can estimate major sources of their data, things like social media, public texts like websites and blogs, publicly available data sets, licensed data, sensory data like cameras, and synthetic data. So that's incredible. It said the big data market is something like almost $350 billion a year. $350 billion. So it said through the way we use our social media, for example, we're willing to give AI companies all sorts of data for free, and maybe we're paying for it with our mental health. Wow. So they said that's a power of data, and they said you've got to have transparency in how it's used and collected. But right now, it's a lack of transparency. Creators aren't paid when their work is used to create new content. It says AI describes the original sin, they say, of AI describes a phenomenon where you have all these big AI companies. They're just scooping up large parts of the internet, things like images and video and audio and text, to create their models, but they don't pay anybody for that intellectual property that they acquire. I mean, that's something pretty frustrating. So they said that has huge implications for artists and content creators and writers. AI, I like this sentence. They said AI is basically a huge plagiarizing machine. So I teach college students, and we spend a lot of time on plagiarism. So plagiarism is taking information that somebody else created and using it for your own benefits, and you don't pay them anything. So they came up with an example. The New York Times has filed a monstrous lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft. Why? OpenAI, they claim, used millions of copyrighted articles from the New York Times to train their AI model without permission. Now that caused problems. Why? ChatGPT then reproduced those articles in their responses, just tweaked a few words slightly, and that caused economic harm because New York Times wanted people to pay. They had a paywall. They wanted people to pay to find those articles and read them, but they're being given away free by ChatGPT. So that lawsuit also includes an accusation of a reputational damage because sometimes the AI models make up information when they don't know better. They call that hallucinating. Okay, so that's kind of scary, isn't it? Here's another one. Let's see. Another example in the music industry. They said some major record companies like Sony and Warner and others have sued Suno, S-U-N-O, for data collection that it's using for its music generation tool. They said actually Suno is unauthorized to use copyright recordings. So can you see the problem there? Okay, number 2, what was another problem with what AI is doing as far as transparency? They're training on unknown data, and they're worried that that might empower biased views to dominate. Well, yeah. I mean, we don't know what data is being used. We don't know how AI models are working internally, so you can end up with a lot of bias to be dominant. When only a certain viewpoint gets fed into the machine, guess what's going to come out? So what if they do this? Here's their example. If you have a majority of literature that you put into your machine, but maybe that literature despises religion, and it's going to automatically see Christianity as well. So what kind of truth is going to come out of that? One of my one of my favorite examples here, and I remember seeing this online in February of last year, 2024. Google wanted to, they felt it was really important to have unbiased outcomes in terms of race. So it kind of backfired, though. Their AI model, was asked to generate historically accurate pictures of Nazis. So instead of giving back pictures of white soldiers, it generated a picture of a black Nazi. Wow. So apparently big tech doesn't control or understand AI. Why would it even allow that to happen? And they don't seem to be testing it well enough. Okay, so that was interesting. So you get radical views. It says biased AI could influence the generated outcome and provide users with just selected information, not truth, but just an angle that they want to proceed with. And then number 3, here's that black box issue, talking about transparency. We don't understand the inner workings. So we only understand the true capabilities if we've explicitly tested for them. And they've talked about that before. So they said, what's going on inside? You got these hidden layers. And so it's totally confusing to people trying to figure out what's happening here. So what would you have to do? Well, you'd have to really test the system for an infinite number of possibilities and biases and outcomes, and that's just not going to happen. And they said, we're in trouble here, right? And said, there's sandbagging that's going on. There are models that are actually hiding their capabilities in testing scenarios. So here's an example. It said, when a model can hide its full capabilities in one situation only to reveal them in something else, another situation, that's sandbagging. So maybe that was due to safety training, but sometimes a model selectively displays its capabilities. So it said, now what if you train a sandbagger model that's trained to do that, to hide capabilities? And it can do that. Isn't that interesting? They can pretend that they can or cannot do certain things. All right, so here's the second point. So that was a long way to go, but remember, we're talking about the effects of AI on 3 Christian values. That was the one on transparency. Let's do the second one, human flourishing. So what does human flourishing mean? Well, we're supposed to have a spiritual connection and dependence on God. That's how we flourish best. We're supposed to have community and relationships and care for each other. That's part of the biblical worldview, isn't it? And that's good for human flourishing. We need work that's fulfilling and something that would strengthen our relationship with God. And then finally, hobbies and intellectual discussion, physical activity, that's part of human flourishing. So how's AI matching up with that, those things? So let's go with the first of those 4. Remember, we're talking now human flourishing. So spiritual connection and dependence on God. Right? So, but here's the problem. Today, people are coming up with substitutes for dependence on God. Right? Many are choosing material goods or ideologies as their gods. And AI, this is the scary part, I think, has the capability of being worshipped and idolized for what it can do. I mean, pretty soon, AI takes on godlike abilities like mass surveillance. I mean, we're seeing that in China especially. It said China has recently added 400 million new cameras to their surveillance network so they can watch night and day. What else can this do that is a substitute for God? Reading thoughts. AI is capable of reading your thoughts, and it works the same way as training of any other AI model in any other field of interest. So it says in an experiment in Australia, researchers were able to recreate thoughts of a participant in text by training a model on brainwave activities. Wow. It correctly translated thoughts into words 40% of the time. Well, you say, let's not worry about that, but it's getting better and better at doing these things. Here's a third reason people may substitute a different idol for God: superhuman intelligence. I mean, this is intelligence way beyond anything that we're familiar with. So can you imagine, this is a quote from, a man named Huizinga. He says, the new idols that we're building. All right, here's the quote. In the Old Testament, the distinction between the idols and the living God was that the idols couldn't hear, and they couldn't speak, and they couldn't move. But, he says, the strange and worrying thing is that now we have idols that can do all these things. And so they're much more dangerous as idols, much more powerful, much more deceptive. It seems to me, this is again Heisinger, that in terms of the spiritual warfare, it's like a whole new front is opening up, which hasn't been there before. So we depend on God, right? And we don't, hopefully we don't fall victim to idolizing machines, but that's not the case in the secular world. There's a spiritual vacuum that's there, and it's going to be filled by God, or it's going to be filled by something else. And unfortunately, right, it's only, we know Jesus is the only one that can fill that, but we're going to make an idol of our technology as a substitute for God, they point out. Why? To help us overcome death and to gain some kind of companionship and things like that. It's really sad. It says some people are seeing AI as the solution to life. It's supposed to serve us, though. All right, here's a second thing as far as human flourishing goes. We're supposed to have be part of a community, have relationships. We're supposed to care for each other. But look what AI has done. It's actually fragmented communities. It's fostering isolation and alienation. People sit in front of a screen. They don't interact with each other. There's a sense of separation. And they said social media. Now, it does connect people globally, but it often deepens that divide. It replaces meaningful relationships with all sorts of superficial interactions. And we see that all the time, don't we? Virtual reality. You can have your whole community right online there. They said, think about the kids that are being born right around now. They're going to experience the majority of their childhood and life in the digital world. They're not going to experience many crucial real-world experiences like navigating conflicts. So they said, we have some issues there, right? There's some huge problems. These synthetic relationships are going nowhere as far as really helping people out. Something like 200 million people globally visit platforms every month and spend about 2 hours on them. Wow. AI is affecting people around the world in our next generation. Here's another area. By the way, they said, why is it AI systems are so good at capturing millions of users? Because they imitate human behavior. And they often don't tell you that they're an AI system. They can read us. They can use our information. They can use statistics to predict what we want to hear and talk about. Boy, that is persuasive, isn't it? They can bring your favorite characters to life and respond from their perspective. So, good heavens. This says AI systems know how to respond to a certain type of human being to keep them engaged in the conversation. And of course, the AI systems don't even know that they're an AI system. So, try going to something like character.ai. And they encourage us. They say, go ahead and take a look. Choose a character, click the phone button, and start talking. It says, play around with the different characters. And it says, it can mess you up forever. And they tell a story about a 14-year-old boy in Orlando, Florida. He was having an extensive relationship with a chatbot on a character AI, and it was imitating a Game of Thrones character. And the relationship included sexualized and emotionally intimate conversations. Well, that connection with the AI system ended when the boy committed suicide after expressing his intentions to do so to the chatbot. And so the chatbot didn't suggest prevention or stopping him. When the teenager said, what if I told you I could come home right now? The bot said, please do, my sweet king. So it can create some really sad things going on here. How about this? A father discovered a chatbot of his murdered daughter, which used her name and exact high school yearbook photo as its profile picture. Someone had created that chatbot on character AI without getting consent from the family. So look how easy it is to replicate any person's identity online these days. Character AI.ai removed the character after being notified by the family. Well, here's the third thing. We want work that's fulfilling. That's part of, flourishing as humans. We're supposed to work that's good for us and it strengthens our relationship to God. Yeah, that's great. But what's going on now with AI? Well, it's stripping away the meaning of work, right? Companies are not trying to help people get their work done, but they really want to replace humans in their work. It's so much cheaper, so much more reliable to have a machine, more effective, easier to control. Hey, machines don't complain. They don't ask for pay raises. They don't bring personal issues to work. Well, what's going on here? Well, in areas like research and design and art and business even, it's going to have a huge impact on business, higher education. It's going to be a great teacher, but it doesn't teach critical thinking skills. So that's pretty scary. So these are some problems that we're going to get into with work being replaced. Here's a fourth area, final area, and then we'll end the podcast. Hobbies, intellectual discussion, and physical activity. That's part of human flourishing. They said that people that are older are not going to be really affected by AI because they've already got their hobbies and they already do physical activities and they already are thinking. But on the other hand, what about younger generations? They're not going to grow up in a world without AI. And it said it'll seem chaotic to us. But what about them? Well, VR is really entertaining, isn't it? And it's going to be more and more realistic. You're going to have access to your personal AI. You can do anything you want. They said it won't be just gaming, though. Imagine AI porn, AI entertainment in VR. People are already struggling with dealing with some of these things that are online. Said, can you imagine how many people are going to get sucked into that situation? They can manifest any vision or thought into reality, maybe even interact with it through items in the physical world, like sex robots or feedback suits and things we can't even imagine today. But they said, there is hope. Americans are, even though we've got all these technological advances, people are choosing the real world over the virtual. So I hope that's true. So they said humanity is going to get further individualized and be alone. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold off on the third point of what this chapter was talking about. So let me go back over the beginning part of it again here. They were talking about the effects on Christian virtues, right? And they said 3 virtues are going to be really changed because of AI: transparency, human flourishing, and free will. So I want to do the free will in another section later on. So I just did changing us with our transparency and human flourishing. And I think the key one there is human flourishing. If I was talking to somebody who is not a Christian, who is all in on AI and thought it should just do everything, I think when we talk about what makes the human race flourish, and then look at what AI is doing and what a difference there is. Well, thanks for being part of this podcast, and please be aware of AI. If you're interested, I've done a talk. I'll be glad to send you an outline. Actually, I've prepared 2 different talks on AI, and I'll be glad to send you an outline of both of them and at least get you thinking and give you some good resources to go to next. Well, thanks so much for being part of this, and I hope things are going well for you.